In an earlier video of Don Ray's Winging It series, I told you about taking a sick dog to Saigon by hijacking a couple helicopters. And the dog survived, but while I was there at the veterinary hospital on Tan Son Nhut Air Base, I did see one of our other dogs from Soc Trang, where I was the temporary vet tech, untrained. And the dog was being put down because it had this disease that they were calling the nose bleeding disease. It got the name because American German Shepherd dogs would all of a sudden, their noses start bleeding. By the time they could get help anywhere, the dog would die because every organ in its body was inflamed. So they were stumped. They could never get a dog on antibiotics quickly enough to prevent the point where the nose would be bleeding. So they were stumped over this thing. So when I got back to my little clinic at the 212th MP Sentry Dog detachment at Soc Trang Army Airfield, I called the veterinarian and said, hey, what can I do to prevent this? And he said, you can do nothing to prevent it because it can only be cured, or the dog's life can only be saved if we learn much, much earlier that the dog has a problem. And I said, well, how would you do that? And he said, well, you would have to test the white blood cell count and a thing called hematocrit, which is the red blood cell count. And I said, well, why can't I do that? And he said, well, because one, you don't know how, and two, you don't have the equipment. So I said, all right, well, if you're coming by here soon, could you bring me what I would need in case I could find a way to do it? And sure enough, he showed up a few days later with a whole box full of these vacuum tubes that you could use to take blood from dogs. So after he left the next morning, I took blood from one dog. I went to the dispensary, the human dispensary, on a little airstrip. I went to the hematology lab where there were 3 guys in there working, and I said, hey, can you check this blood here for white blood cells and hematocrit? And they said, why? I said, just do it for me, please. And they said, all right. So they put it on a slide and looked under the microscope, and immediately this guy says, what the hell's going on? Whose blood is this? This person looks sick. And I said, it's not a person, it's a dog. He said, oh, no. We are not allowed to do any blood work on animals whatsoever. Absolutely not. Forget it. And I said, well, but I really need to bring blood samples every Monday morning of 12 dogs. They said, no, absolutely not. We are not allowed to do it. And I said, okay, well, am I allowed to do it? He said, well, yeah, but you don't know how. And I said, but you could teach me. And then the guy says, yeah, well, so suppose we were to do that, what would we get out of this? And the guy back behind him says, blood. And the guy says, yeah, every Monday morning we have to give our own blood for different samples and things like that to test the equipment. You come in on Monday morning with your blood from your dogs, you give us your blood, and then we'll let you test the blood. So magically, I was able to get access to this thing, and I started bringing the vials of blood in every Monday morning and tested them on the microscope for white blood cell count, and then I put them in the centrifuge and tested them for hematocrit, which showed the percentage of red blood cells compared to something else. I'm no scientist, but anyway, so I did that, and then I'd come back to my little detachment, my little office, and I would chart them on the wall. And I did that for about 3 weeks, maybe 4. And then all of a sudden, one of the dogs showed a dip in both the white blood cell count and the hematocrit. So immediately I had another dog handler take the dog and get a flight to Saigon, to Tan Son Nhut, and to where they could possibly give him antibiotics early enough to prevent him dying from this nose bleeding syndrome. Well, right after that, my world came to an end, sort of, because a new veterinarian a school-trained veterinarian came in to replace me. And by that time, I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. But I was replaced. My attitude sucked, so they moved me off to another place, another detachment, a place called Vung Tau. While I'm at Vung Tau, a couple months later, I think it is, I take my dog in to the vet tech there, where they're going to clean the teeth. And of course, they have to wear muzzles because these dogs want to eat everybody. And so I laid the dog down, and then I opened up his mouth in just the correct way so that the vet tech could get the tools in there. And the vet tech said, whoa, How did you learn to do that? And I said, oh, well, a while back I was at Sock Trying. I was a temporary vet tech there. And he says, oh, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not kidding. He says, so you're the one. I'm the one? I'm the one what? He says, you're the one that sent the dog to Tonsanute, to the veterinary hospital. You're the one that sent the first dog that survived the nose bleeding disease. And I was shocked. Nobody told me about that. But here it was that I had done something that had worked really, really well. They would go on very soon after that to discover what the virus was, and they were able then to prevent any other U.S. dogs, thousands of them, in Vietnam and Okinawa from catching the disease. So even though I never got a good conduct medal, and even though I got transferred for having a crummy attitude when I had to go back to walking dogs, bottom line was I know in my heart I did something good, and I'm really, really proud of that.